Thank you, and Madam Clerk, I believe we can include that in our amendments to the agenda.
Yes, we can.
Then may I please have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, moved by Councilor Maravich, seconded by Councilor Brenda Johnson. All those in favor?
Carried.
Are there any declarations of interest? None, seeing none. May I please have a motion to approve the May 18, 2017 meeting minutes as
So moved.
presented? And Madam Clerk, 9.1 now? All right. Councilor Johnson?
Thank you. Councilor Vanderbeek is my seconder. I'll just read out the text. It is self-explanatory. Be it resolved that the non-union compensation committee provide a report on the implications, be provided a report on the implications of the new minimum wage laws in the province of Ontario, specifically in relation to the city's relevant legal obligations and budget.
Thank you, Councilor. Are there any questions, discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you, Councilor. Moving on to item 4, delegation requests. We have a delegation request for a future meeting from Diana Weir respecting Hamilton Philharmonic Orchestra updates. What is the committee's wish? Councilor Maravich to move it. Seconded by Councilor Collins. All those in favor?
Carried.
Carried. We have a delegation request for a future meeting from Patricia Leclerc respecting Hamilton Children's Choir updates.
So
Committee
moved.
wish, moved by Councilor Collins, seconded by Councilor Vanderbeek. All those in favor?
Carried.
Members of the committee, we are now on consent items. May I please have a little differently this time? We're going to move them all in at one point, at one time. May I please have a motion to receive items 5.1, 5.3, 5.4, 5.6, 5.7, 5.8, 5.9, and 5.10, and approve item 5.5. Moved by Councilor Pearson, seconded by Councilor Aidan Johnson. All those in favor?
Carried.
Oh, sorry.
Are you not going to allow questions in
Oh,
this?
sure. I'm sorry, Councilor Ferguson.
Okay, and so I'll go all the reports and I have questions at the top.
Sure.
Okay, first one is on item number, page 12 of the hedging report. It's item 5.6.
5.6.
On page 12. And it shows that, and it's a good news story. There's a net reduction on natural gas of $1,133,000. But my only question is, and I don't know who to put this through to, I'll let the right person try to answer it, is they show the $1.133 million on savings on the purchase of natural gas. You're showing it as an avoided cost rather than a cost reduction. This is on the natural gas buses. Can you tell me why it's in there as an avoided cost rather than an actual budget savings that will enjoy future budgets?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, Councilor, this $1.13 million is based on relationship between the cost of conventional diesel versus what we pay in natural natural gas. So the mathematics behind that is how we arrive at that.
Okay, but we invested some $16 million to buy new natural gas buses because of natural gas is heading south where diesel's going north. And it shows us avoided cost of $133. So what I'm trying to get my head around is we make that kind of investment, we look for the return. So why are you showing it as avoided cost rather than actual savings?
Yes, through the chair. Again, Councilor, just the way that this energy commodity board has been reporting this traditionally, that's how we've presented it. So again, based on the discussion we've had previously with regards to the annual energy report, and show those numbers certainly, you can take that back to the office and have them reported in that fashion.
Because the problem with using avoided costs, and look what we saved you, but there's no savings in the budget. Whereas hard savings is something we can look for at budget time. Where's that $1.1 million in savings? Because we made such a significant investment in buses. So, you know, this is just my personal opinion. I don't like that word avoided cost because it shows what a great job our energy group's doing, but you never see the savings. It never pops up. And I don't, you know, they've done an excellent job at our last meeting on reporting on how much kilowatt hours, for example, less we're using as a result of our energy emissions. That's exactly what we need to see. I know commodity prices are all over the place when you pick electricity and you don't have any handle. But I'm curious to know if we make, and I saw Mike pull his microphone up. you make a $15 million investment in natural gas buses because the energy costs are so much lower, and you have a $1.1 million, so it's working, why do you show it as a budget cost rather than a budget reduction?
So through the chair, we can confirm this. What I suspect, staff were developing the budget knowing that they were doing the conversion from diesel to natural gas. They adjusted the budget to reflect that savings right into the budget. So we will we can provide that, confirm that through an email to you, Councillor. And that's, for that reason, it's shown as an avoided cost. But where the savings would have been reflected is through the budget process. It would have been reflected through staff appropriately budgeting for the savings of converting from diesel to natural gas.
Okay, and through you, Madam Chairman, Mike, that's been my pet peeve for years, as you know. We get these reports in May and June, and everything looks wonderful, but you never see it up on the screen when Public Works does a presentation. So I don't recall a reduction in fuel costs at budget time. And so I want to get away from this avoided cost. I want to pick these off reports, put them on a sticky note on my wall, and then go ask questions at budget time. Where are these savings? If in fact they're real. And so that's what I'm just trying to get my head around. Thank you. And I have some other questions too, if I can, on, I'm not used to doing them all at once. So on report number 5.8, this is a report back of the total revenue in POA charges went down from 11 million to 10 million. So I asked how much for police, and so I asked for the report back. So it looks like it's good news that it's gone up from 51 to 53% of the total revenues from police, because we do have a new chief in place. You know, it's a subjective decision. Officer has discretion whether to, in fact, lay a charge. Our previous chief was a bit of a tough guy about that stuff, and I want to make sure that that is continuing, and it looks like it is. If our revenue's gone up 51 to 53% for police POAs. However, on 5.9, it shows that the revenue from police has dropped from $82 million in 2012, or $82,000, if I'm reading this correctly. Our police charges, the number of physical charges, the previous report showed one, which shows it went up from 51 to 53%. But when you go to page 6 of 5.9, the actual revenue, or the number of charges has gone down from 82,000 to 66,000. So I'm curious to know how revenue went up, the number of charges went down, or our claims gone up that much. I don't know who can handle this. What I'm trying to do is just, as chairman of the police services board, make sure we keep each fire and whatnot that we're expected to do, and make sure that the officers out there are doing their job. The only way you know is by these KPIs. So revenue went up, the number of charges went down. How do you explain that?
Through the chair, just as a reminder, POA is based on a cash-based system, so the revenue collected is not just for the current year, but it's for previous years as well. So that's why you see the discrepancy between the number of charges and the revenue received, because one is based on number of charges within the year, the other one is based on the amount of cash received within the year, which could mean charges for that year or charges from previous years.
Oh, so we could see, in fact, revenues from POA charges from police going down next year.
I can't predict what the trend will be. Oh, sorry, through the chair, I can't predict what the trend will be, but once again, it's just the way the system is generated from a cash perspective. You may see it going up or down depending upon the payment of fees for the current year as well as previous year.
Well, we go from 82,000 charges to 68,000, that's probably going to trend it down. Particularly if it lags a year.
Through the chair, it could lag more than a year, so you may see that trend in future years.
Okay, all I'm trying to look for, Madam Chairman, is how are we trending on this? Is there any changes due to personnel changes or policy changes? It sounds like I can't use this then as a toolbox or a key performance indicator to see how we're doing. Great news that the revenue's up, but the trending down in the number of charges, not that we don't want any charges, we don't want any charges against our citizens, but we just got to make sure our 900 sworn officers are out there doing what they're supposed to do and keeping our city safe. And I don't know what other KPI to use to measure that. If there's any suggestions, I'd appreciate it, but I think that concludes my questions in that area.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. On 510, I was just going to ask through you to Laura. The report here focuses on our former clerical and general labor pool, as well as temp agency usage. And I'm curious whether there is a desire to go back to the former system that seemed to work relatively well. I've read the report a couple of times in terms of the grievance activity and next steps, but can I ask through you to Laura as to whether or not the former system that we had at the time of amalgamation, whether that is an option for committee and council?
So through you, Madam Chair, ultimately, I think that is our desired state. We want to do a pilot project to ensure that it is more cost effective, the grievance rates go down, but it is a desired state to have our own employees having an understanding of our skill sets and sending them to the various departments. It just has, we've got greater control and autonomy over the process. So indeed, that is our ultimate recommendation.
And what are the timelines associated with that through Madam Chair?
Through the chair, the pilot project is from September of 2017 to the end of 2018, and we'll be coming back to council with a recommendation, hopefully to bring both the clerical pool and the labor pool internal.
And will that be just one division or department, or are we spreading that across the organization?
Through the chair, the clerical and labor pool is for the entire corporation.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Pearson, followed by Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a couple things on report 5.5, just some clarification more than anything. This is the tax. Tax appeals. On page 204, there's two properties, and the first one, 375 Green Road, I know is 410, and that has to do with the conversion from, I believe they've made chimneys, stainless steel chimneys. So now I understand there's a business running out of that. That's okay. But down at the bottom, it says 59 Green Road. But I believe that should be Green Mountain, just as clarification. I don't have any driveways in Morton. Not yet. It says tax conversion is still being used as driveway. Would that not be Green Mountain Road? Thank you.
Thank you, and Councillor Ferguson, before I get to you, I'm going to second next speaker. I'd like to ask a question, and so I'll ask Councillor Vanderbeek to take the chair, and then I'll come back to you for a second time. And it's regarding electricity consumption and costs. I don't know who can speak to this, but can you share with us, I know we are more efficient in terms of consumption, but how would you rate our costs, say, compared to, I'm thinking maybe the beginning of 6 years ago, 2 terms ago, or I'm just trying to see the increase, if you could share with us what some of the concerns are with the rising cost of electricity.
Yes, through the chair. Certainly, it has been a steady climb increase in terms of electricity costs. And overall, the impact to the city has been increase in cost despite consumption either flat or trending downward. Excuse me. So in this year's report, we cite it's about a 7% increase from 2015 to the 2016 reporting year. Previous years have been similar percentage increases. So that trend looks like it's going to continue. And so at what point, that's uncertain. Certain different rate classes will be impacted by the government's actions to reduce costs to residential consumers. But in terms of impact here on the city, it'll be status quo business as usual.
Do you have any, I'm just trying to think of, in terms of the burden on our budget, the bottom line, what kind of, can you give us just an idea of how much of an increase in electricity rates that we have experienced in the past number of years?
Yes, through the chair. Roughly speaking, about $1 million in electricity budget represents about 1% increase in the tax line.
Chris, did you say you wanted, are you raising your hand? Or? No, okay, thank you. Those are my questions. I'll take the chair back, Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I didn't want this to go by without being noticed either. It's really messing me up here to do them all in one block. But I guess we'll get used to it, Madam Chair, if that's what you're going to do going forward. So through you, Ken, first of all, congratulations on reducing your outside legal costs. I don't think we should let that go by unnoticed. You've gone from 1.5 million in 2012 down to $177,000 in outside legal costs. And that's great to see, and we're also seeing a trend down in legal costs. And so thank you for you and your lawyers for your efforts in doing more internally rather than going to outside legal. And here we're saving the taxpayers for outside legal costs of $1.3 million, which is pretty significant. The bad trend, though, on the next page, on page 3, is that there's been a significant spike from 2014 to 2016 on new litigation files. And is there something happening? Is this more stuff going to LMB? Is this claim people slip and falls? Is there, I'm reading a few of them here. There are 34 pre-trials, 34 motions, examination for discoveries. Does that concern you with a significant increase in the number of legal claims that the city's seeing?
Through you, Madam Chair. So at this point, the answer is no. There is certainly a trend that we're seeing an increase in those. But at the moment, we're able to manage those in terms of our capacity and prioritizing through the department workflow. So at the moment, no. But we do work with risk, and now that actually risk is part of our department, we're working closely with them to make sure that we are managing those trends and seeing if there are areas that we need to focus our energy on, we will take care of those.
Okay, and with that significant reduction in the amount spent on outside legal counsel, have you had to hire more lawyers to do that, or you still got the same complement?
So at the moment, we're maintaining the complement.
Can-
At the moment, we're maintaining the same complement, so we haven't added any lawyers.
Perfect, that's worth a high five. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And on the earlier note, Madam Clerk, is there a reason why we are addressing all of these items in one clump as opposed to going through individually and having an opportunity to speak to them?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that other standing committees do follow this format, so we'll move forward with that. But if it's the committee's wish, we can certainly look at going back to the old way of doing things.
I think I'm hearing, just from nodding of the heads, would committee prefer to go back to the original one? Maybe just a show of hands. Madam Clerk, with that, can I provide direction to perhaps return to addressing each item on an individual basis in the future? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor, for pointing that out. And Councillor, your microphone's off, just to let you know. Thank you. So in that, any other questions? All in favor?
Carried.
Any opposed? Carried. Public hearings, none. Presentations. Jody Koch, Manager, Talent Diversity, respecting Human Rights, Diversity and Inclusion Strategic Plan. Laura, did you want to introduce Jody?
Introduce her. Thank you, Madam Chair. Council will recall about a year ago, Access and Equity was transferred over to Human Resources. We've made a lot of changes over the last 12 months. We hired Jody Koch, who is our new Manager of Talent and Diversity, and she and her team have put together a strategic plan for diversity, inclusion, and human rights. So this is our introduction to Council.
Morning, Jody.
Morning.
And welcome aboard.
Thank you very much. We wanted today just to provide a high-level overview of where we are with respect to the Human Rights, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan, and wanted to share with Council our thoughts on moving forward for 2017.
Jody, can you move the monitor down? We'd love to. Ernie, can you take that roll for
And our mission to provide high-quality, cost-conscious public services that contribute to a healthy, safe, and prosperous community in a sustainable manner. So obviously, right in keeping with the city's strategic plan. Our principles for the purposes of human rights and diversity and inclusion is to ensure that we create, foster, support, and ultimately sustain a city culture whereby all people feel a strong sense of inclusion, empowerment, and opportunity for development and growth. The links to the city strategic plan focus on community engagement and participation, economic prosperity and growth, healthy and safe communities, built environment and infrastructure, culture and diversity, and of course our people and performance plan. So the next several slides will just take you through at a high level how we are going to be supporting these various initiatives. Through active involvement in and in consultation with our volunteer advisory groups, as many of you are aware, we support 8 of the volunteer advisory committees. We've actually made some changes to that support format, whereas previously those 8 volunteer groups were supported by 1 staff liaison primarily. We're actually dividing those 8 committees up across 4 staff, so each staff will be responsible for supporting 2 committees in hopes that we'll be better able to support in a more focused effort the initiatives of those committees. Economic prosperity and growth. A diverse and inclusive culture is essential for attracting and retaining the best ideas and talent, which are the key ingredients for future success. One of the things that I learned in my time here is our full-time permanent hires that we bring into the city, 20% are not with us at the 12-month mark. And that's a really concerning number when you think of there's some reason that people join the city looking forward to the opportunity, but yet at the 12-month mark, a full 20% of our full-time employees are no longer employed with us. So that gives us a real opportunity to understand what is it that's driving that and how can we better provide that environment that people feel engaged and empowered as municipal employees so that they can support some of these really important initiatives. Obviously, a lot of our focus is on the built environment and infrastructure, so much of the work that's been done through AODA continues on, but in a more sustainable manner. And we're taking a little bit that focus on the built environment, although it's very important, it's now become more of a matter of course as opposed to a new initiative. And we're actually broadening beyond that to look at diversity and inclusion in a broader scale rather than simply as the ramp of a sufficient grade to allow me to have access to the building. But we want to ensure that our employees, citizens, and visitors have equitable access to a safe and supportive environment in which to live, work, and play through our policies, commitments, services, and facilities. Culture and diversity. It goes without saying that the strategic plan is intrinsically linked to all of our corporate culture pillars, and all are essential in terms of having a diverse and inclusive environment. Our people and performance. Attracting, selecting, and retaining the best talent is essential for our success. We'll strive to be the employer of choice for the region and to share our learnings with others. And there's a lot of opportunities to take many of the things we're doing and share those with other municipalities as well as other organizations in the city of Hamilton. Our citizens will trust in our commitment to create and sustain a city culture built on diversity and inclusion. Obviously, healthy and safe communities, an environment where everyone feels welcomed and safe is critical for both our workplace and all of our municipal facilities. Creating a safe space for work and play where everyone feels that they belong and they're empowered to be who they are in that space. So our priorities for our team for 2017 are focused on legislative and policy compliance, education, workplace diversity, workplace inclusion, and database and metric tracking. So that's another opportunity for us to focus on actually collecting statistics and metrics to better understand the work we're doing and the effect it's actually having. So this is just a listing of many of the policies and legislation that we focus on as well. At the time this was written, Bill 114 had not yet been approved, but this will be added to the list as well. Workplace diversity. We want to ensure that our employees reflect the diverse composition of the community that we serve and that our employees feel empowered to add value in a meaningful manner. We want to work in conjunction with our city leaders, our city council, and community partners to improve awareness on the importance of diversity and inclusion within the workplace. We want to work alongside our neighborhood and community initiatives group, who is doing a lot of positive work, and there's a lot of synergies that we can leverage by working in conjunction with them on such things as the Urban Indigenous Strategy and the Hamilton Immigration Partnership Council, just to name a couple. And to partner with employee groups such as the Hamilton Young Professionals to improve awareness within the front line of the organization. We actually just had a meeting with the Board of Directors of Hamilton Young Professionals this morning, and they reach out to over 400 employees at a very grassroots level. And if we can start communicating this message across the organization in that way, we're bound to reach more people in a more meaningful manner. database and metric tracking, to establish a formal database both for tracking human rights issues and AODA issues. Accurate records will be maintained in a confidential manner, and data compilation will allow for trend analysis to allow us to become more proactive in our approach and identify issues as they emerge, as opposed to being more reactive. Information can then be used to develop focused training and skill development throughout the organization. Our goals, very simply, for 2017, to rebrand the former Human Rights Access and Equity as Human Rights Diversity and Inclusion, site presentations to be developed and delivered to all key client group leadership. We've actually met with the senior level team, as well as a number of the departmental leadership teams sharing this same presentation. And as well, we've been sharing this presentation with our volunteer advisory committees as well and getting their feedback. We want to ensure compliance with all of our legislative reporting requirements, including our year-end report for AODA, and the creation and utilization of an electronic database for all human rights and AODA issues by the end of 2014. We're going to be developing a training plan to deal with the mandatory training on It Starts With You and the AODA customer service, and deliver the required training with a completion rate of an improvement of 10% year over year. We're going to be reviewing our volunteer advisory committee staff liaison roles and how we can better support those committees and allowing those committees to better support council. And we're going to be reviewing our process of complaints. And when we do get issues or queries that come to us, how do we investigate those complaints in a timely manner and ensure, perhaps most importantly, that closure is made on all of those issues with the respective parties. And we also want to be looking at our recruitment and selection processes. The new Bill 114 is going to be allowing for data collection, which will actually be helpful for us as we move forward in understanding the demographics of our applicant pools, as well as those as they proceed through the recruitment process to determine who are the successful candidates in that process. And all of that we're looking at having implemented by year-end 2014. Many of these initiatives we've already started working on. And with that, Madam Chair, that is the presentation.
Thank you, Jody. And before we get to questions, if I could just ask you to expand a little bit on your background. It's a unique background, if I could have council's or committee's approval to just ask you to expand a little bit on your own personal history, because it is unique, and you're coming to the city with some strengths that I think we should acknowledge before we move further on into this presentation.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I grew up in Thunder Bay and went away to school and never went back. So my background is I've spent 20 plus years in private manufacturing. I worked for Ford Motor Company, and then more recently I was the director of HR for US Steel Canada. So through those experiences, both with Ford and with US Steel, we had very strong diversity and inclusion programs. And that might seem strange, given that we're heavy manufacturing and you wouldn't necessarily think diversity and inclusion was a key business priority. But what we learned is not only is diversity and inclusion the right thing to do, it's actually good for business as well. So I've served on the Ford Motor Company of Canada Executive Diversity Council. I've served on the Volvo Cars North America Diversity Council, as well as the US Steel Global Executive Diversity Council. And much of that has shaped me in terms of my view of the world, as well as my belief and passion for why this is important work. And we need to move past simply talking about diversity and inclusion as something that's to check the box and say that we're doing it, and actually translate it into meaningful work and simply becoming part of who we are. So if you think of diversity and inclusion as much like what health and safety was like many years ago, it's something you had to do. Now it's just a fabric of what we do. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for us to make diversity and inclusion simply part of what we are, as opposed to an initiative or a project.
Thank you. Interesting background. Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Jody, thanks for the presentation. A lot of information. I'm just curious to know the trends related to human rights complaints with those filed by the public to the corporation and those filed internally by our employees as part of some kind of a quasi-HR process. So do we have those stats in terms of trends? I'm not looking for specific details, but are we trending in the right direction on both of those, or could you share with us some information related to both of those avenues.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. What we're seeing in both fronts is greater focus on accommodation issues or access issues. So for the public, the majority of the issues are dealing with accessibility in terms of actually physical built environment. For most of our staff issues, they're relating to disability accommodation within the workplace. In terms of trending, we haven't been able to necessarily indicate are the trends favorable or unfavorable, because we do want issues to get raised. So it's not necessarily that an increase is a bad thing. Perhaps we're just simply increasing awareness, and as a result, we're having more of that meaningful dialogue. But the single biggest issue across the board is dealing with accommodation or disability-related issues.
Okay. And in terms of the cost, there is a cost to do that. Do we have numbers in terms of what it's costing us to deal with those increased number of files?
Again, through you, Madam Chair, the cost in terms of the structure within our department, it's the same number of people. We've actually taken a headcount reduction. But in terms of the actual legal costs associated with some things going to the tribunal, I would have to get back to you in terms of what that trending looks like over the last several years.
That'd be great. And the latter is what I'm looking for in terms of going to the tribunal and going through that, just for information purposes, that's all. Thanks, Jody, for the information.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I do have a question. If Councillor Vanderbeek, if you could take the chair. Jody, how does the city ensure that we are considering women, people of color, people from varying socioeconomic backgrounds, people with specific special needs, when we as a council and we as a city are making decisions and policy?
So with respect to that, I think there's a number of things we can do, one of which is being self-aware of our own personal biases and judgments in terms of when we're making decisions. The more self-aware each of us are as individuals, the greater the likelihood is we're going to be aware when our own biases come into play. There are a number of tools that are available to help increase that equity lens focus, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to, for me, are we treating all individuals with utmost respect? And irrespective of their race or gender or ethnicity, do they feel that they're able to come here in an environment that's safe, welcoming, and supportive? There's no lack of research done on how you can be more inclusive, but quite honestly, I think our organization right now is still in the very early stages of that maturity model. And we have to build some foundational things now that are going to help us sustain the path that we need to go on. We do a lot of things at the city. We start a lot of projects. We aren't particularly great at finishing them. And really what our focus is now is, rather than trying to do 28 things and perhaps not do any of them particularly well, we want to focus on doing 3 to 5 things and executing flawlessly. But we have to build that foundation in order for it to sustain itself going forward.
Thank you. And do you believe that we have the capacity, the capability, the tools in place currently under your supervision to be able to move forward in that direction?
I think we have tremendous opportunity and a tremendous willingness. If there's one thing I could say about my experience here over the last several months, is the willingness and the support for this. We aren't always good at knowing how to translate that into action. And I think that that's one of the things we see through our volunteer advisory committees as well as through our staff groups, is we need to be focused more on the implementation part. And I think we need to put more tools in place and more structure in place to be better able to deliver.
Thank you. Those are my questions. I'll take the chair back. Councillor Aidan Johnson.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Jody. I met Jody back in March, a couple of weeks after we voted to implement the transgender protocol, and was immediately blown away by her caring and her professionalism. And I had the opportunity to meet with her last week to discuss this report and ask some questions offline, and yet again was deeply impressed and above all grateful for the profundity and the compassion that she's bringing to our HR work in the realm of equity. We're not the private sector, so we're somewhat less concerned in the City of Hamilton than in the private sector about the argument that says equity is a way to improve efficiency, though that never hurts. Here in the public sector, of course, Madam Chair, we're much more concerned with doing the right thing for the right thing's own sake and having cost as an important secondary concern. And I'm utterly delighted that in the realm of equity, which is probably the best example we have of something that just needs to be done, with cost being something we think about, but in a necessarily secondary way. We have one of the country's most qualified professionals guiding us so that we can think about cost and the right thing together. It's a great privilege to be working with Jody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Thank you, Jody. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you very much.
May I please have a motion to receive the presentation? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All those in favor? Carried. May I have a motion to receive item 7.1? Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Collins. All those in favor? Carried. I'd like to now call upon Robert Burwash, Director of Employee Health and Labour Relations, to give his presentation with regards to item 7.2.
Brought some support. It's true. Okay. So if you recall, back in April, we had brought our annual attendance report forward. And in that report, we talked about citywide levels of attendance, and we also talked about, I guess we given the unique nature of fire on a number of fronts, both in terms of working conditions and also the sick leave plan that's covered, we separated out the fire numbers. And as you may recall, there were numbers that showed an increase year over year, and they were particularly pronounced in fire versus the rest of the city. And understandably, there were concerns there, and we had made a commitment back at that point to have a closer look at what might be driving some of that experience, and we further made a commitment to come back and let you know what we were going to do about it. So what we know at this point is that there really is no single reason for the increase. At first, we thought maybe age had something to do with it, but the average age of firefighters is actually on the decline. And we haven't been able to identify a single reason. We're also further, I guess, hampered, if you will, in the amount of information that we can ask through medical information. That's not unique to fire. There is some privacy issues there. So in all likelihood, at best we can get a general idea as to what's driving sick leave, but we'll never get a completely accurate picture. What we do know is that we can take some steps to try and improve it. And what we've identified is that we don't have a consistent approach in fire with that of the rest of the city. We can certainly do something to change that. Right now, the folks that are by and large managing or effectively managing attendance are in fire administration. They aren't subject matter experts. That's not a criticism. That's just simply the way it is. And the task really falls to someone doing it off the corner of their desk. We've also identified that some of the processes and the procedures related to fire administration not only are inconsistent with the rest of the city, but they could use some updating, and we're going to be working on that. So what is the next steps that we're going to be doing? I'll turn it over to the Chief to introduce the first part of that.
Thanks, Rob. As you heard, we sat down as a group to try and determine what our best course of action is. And the best course of action that we believe strongly in is that this needs to be a collaborative partnership between fire leadership and HR. We need to introduce an 18-month pilot where which again will be funded through existing funding sources through the fire budget. Certainly we believe strongly, after having conversations, that there are savings that we can realize that will help to support this pilot. We need to clearly employ somebody that has expertise in this area. And we know that the Return to Work Services area has that expertise. We need to look at embedding, if you will, although it be centralized and this will be a HR resource. We need to embed them into our division so that they gain a good understanding of what's going on and they gain a better understanding in order to help us to manage this issue. Their sole focus will be on fire attendance and helping us, working with the leadership team to ensure that we see some positive outcomes. Obviously, at the end of the day, fire leadership will benefit by having this experienced HR person within our organization to help us to continue to do what needs to be done to turn this in the right direction.
So in addition to creating this pilot resource, we also need to then look at the policies and procedures that are behind the work that's done related to attendance. So first thing that we're going to change is that all of the medical information will be coming right to HR. Right now it's routed through the fire department. It's not to say that anything is good or bad about that, but this will create a more direct link and more timely sharing of the information. We'll also be looking for greater detail in the medical information. Right now, one of the policies actually provides in specifics that the information can be as simple as under my care on a scribble note, a prescription pad, if you will. We'll be looking for greater detail, obviously honoring and respecting the privacy of firefighters at the same time. One of the other things that we identified is that we could be putting a greater emphasis on accommodation efforts. Right now, again, because there aren't subject matter experts embedded in the process, we'll look to be changing that with this new resource and coming up with more creative and more available accommodation opportunities. And this will assist in getting people back to work more quickly. We also treat occupational and non-occupational injuries and illnesses differently. There is more attention paid to occupational related injuries and illnesses, and we'll be looking to apply that same attention to non-occupational illnesses and injuries. And again, that will help people return to work more quickly and safely. And then the last point is, again, focusing attendance on the return to work efforts. So what are our immediate next steps? We'll be posting and filling that attendance support role. We pretty much have that job description designed, so that should be up and running very shortly. We need to communicate the policy and procedure changes to all of the employees. We'll certainly be involving the Fire Association in that, keeping them informed, getting their feedback and incorporating it where it makes sense. The sick leave is actually driven by the bylaw. We'll continue to look at the bylaw to see if there's anything that needs to be changed there, because that actually determines the level of entitlement. We don't have any suggestions or recommendations on that at this time. And if there's any further work that might need to be done in preparation for bargaining, we'll be working on that as well. So with that, that's the presentation.
Thank you. We have Councillor Brenda Johnson, Councillor Collins, and Councillor Ferguson.
Hello, and thank you very much for the presentation to both of you. I'm just going to take you back to the beginning where you said there's no real identified reason for the high amount of absences. And yet I recall a couple of weeks ago, if not a month ago, that retirement, it seemed like a lot of the absences were close to retirement dates. Are you looking at this, or is this something totally separate from that?
Through the chair, there's no question there certainly seems to be an increase in the accessing of sick leave in the 2 years prior to retirement. However, there's lots of reasons that could be the case. Okay. We're not able to identify, what those reasons are. Again, some of the complications are around the medical information that we can access, but, you know.
So one was based on the timing of the sicknesses, this one's just based on sickness as a whole. That's what you're, right?
Correct.
Okay. So when you said about medical privacy issues, it sounds to me that up to this point that the fire department has been a bit of a silo, if you will. Are any of the other departments following this type of process, or are they all consistently doing the same thing, where all the medicals go to HR, all the back to work is handled through HR? Are there any other departments that you've identified that do the same thing that's been currently happening with the fire?
Through the chair, the purpose of this is to actually bring the processes in fire in alignment with what we do in the rest of the city. So
Okay.
this would create a citywide approach that's consistent.
Thank you. But this is also excluding the police department, correct?
This has nothing to do with police.
And they don't follow the routine. They have their own process.
Through the chair, the police do have their own resources, human resources, and that is managed through them.
Okay, thank you. So I was always under the impression that there was a human resources person that was dedicated to the fire department. Are you saying that it needs to be improved upon, or it just never existed?
Through the chair, there is a person who has focus on fire attendance, but it's not the whole process.
Okay.
So this person will be taking a start to finish look at attendance, dealing with the return to work piece, some of the administrative pieces. They will have sole focused ownership on it, start to back.
Okay, thank you. And through the process that's brought you to today, your last, it just says, sorry, the very last slide said engage fire association representatives. Has that been done all along, or we're just now going to engage the fire association?
So through the chair to the councillor, that's been happening all along. I mean,
Okay.
we speak on attendance pretty much on a daily basis, depending on what's going on, so they're well aware and well
Okay.
involved.
And if this needs to go in camera, please let me know. The bottom bullet says identify any matters to pursue in the collective bargaining. Are we talking about language changing so that it would reflect any changes that we do here?
Through the chair, it really is just I guess, a placeholder at this point, saying that we'll, if something comes up that we identify that is best dealt with there as opposed to a policy or procedure change, then we would deal with that at that time.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you. Councillor Collins?
Thank you, Rob and Chief. I'm trying to understand where we need to focus most of our attention on. Is it more of, I thought the bylaw, the sick bank bylaw was fairly black and white in terms of how it's applied. But then you've referenced, Rob, the policies and procedures to bring them more into conformity with corporate policies and procedures that we'd find in other divisions and departments. And so do we find that we'll yield more benefits in applying those corporate policies and procedures, or is the better management of the sick bank bylaw going to yield more results through the pilot?
Through the chair, right now we know that we have a different experience in terms of sick leave utilization elsewhere in the city. So the thought process is by adopting those practices that are yielding better results or different results elsewhere in the city, will drive some savings there. The sick leave bylaw really just determines the entitlement, how much sick leave somebody has, how they accrue it, the cashing out of it at the end. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't get into detail around, helping people return to work, finding ways for them to attend work more regularly where it's possible. So they really are two separate and distinct things.
All right. And in terms of the position, that's temporary for the duration of the pilot?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. We want to, it is a pilot because it is something different, and we want to make sure it works before we look to make something permanent.
Thank you. And a follow-up to Councillor Johnson's question as it relates to the association. I know that the chief and others have had very good working relationship with Local 288. I'm just curious, it sounds like that with the application of other corporate policies and procedures that we have adopted in HR, although they may not have been applied to the fire area of the organization in quite some time, I'm just wondering whether or not the application leads to more grievances, although Local 288 sounds like is part of this, the solution. We need them on board in terms of making this work. How do we avoid an increased number of grievances because we're now applying other corporate policies and procedures to an area that hasn't seen them before? Is that what you're working through with the local right now in terms of their executive and how we move this forward? Through you, Madam Chair.
Yeah. So through the chair, we are keeping the Fire Association in the loop so that they know what our targeted changes are. And, I can't guarantee that there won't be increased grievances. It's not uncommon when an increased level of scrutiny is placed on this type of thing that there's, sort of a pushback of sorts. But, we are confident that, the efforts that we're going to be undertaking here are defendable, justifiable, and they'll actually help people attend work. This isn't a punitive effort by any stretch of the imagination. It will be a change, and with change comes some, possibly could come some pushback, but we're confident that we're on the right track.
Through the chair to the councillor, I think one of the biggest changes that we're going to see is that we, through return to work services, as the Councillor Johnson suggested, we have had some resource assistance when it comes to occupational sickness. The area that we haven't necessarily had that help is in the non-occupational sickness. I would suggest to you that's one of the significant areas where this is going to have a big impact for us. How is that going to impact the association? I think they're used to the processes that are employed for occupational injury, and many of those, if not all of them, will be employed for the non-oc, so it shouldn't necessarily create a significant issue. That said, we can't predict if there's going to be some folks that may take exception to it and want to go the grievance route, but we actually believe that taking a consistent approach across the board for all absence will certainly be a real positive to us.
Thank you. And are there historical reasons as to why those policies and procedures wouldn't have been applied to date through you?
So through the chair, great question. I'm not sure I have the answer in terms of why not. We have a number of policies and procedures within the department that relates to, when a sick note is required. In some cases, some of them are a little different based on the shift patterns. We have the ability through the bylaw to request them on different times. In terms of specifics, why they're different, I don't think I have that answer for you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Last question would be anticipated savings. I know it's a pilot, and the goal is certainly to get people back to work a little bit quicker within the policies and procedures, and certainly respecting the collective agreement that we have in place with the local. Do we have a best guess in terms of what kind of savings the application of corporate policies and procedures might yield as it relates to the pilot?
Through the chair to the councillor, certainly one of the experiences that we saw in 2013 when fire leadership put a focus on specifically trying to reduce overtime that's related to sick, we saw a significant couple $100,000 reduction. We truly believe, and again, I haven't qualified or quantified yet the total amount, but taking a consistent approach on a daily basis with all types of absenteeisms, we're certainly, we strongly believe that we'll see more than enough to cover the cost of the resource that we're going to put in. And certainly it's our hope that it will have a double impact in terms of not only reducing the sick time payouts that we're making, but also a reduction in overtime cost.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chief.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'd just like to thank Rob and the Chief for addressing this so quickly. I know it really jumped off the page of me that we have a chronic problem in this area. And it sounds like a great solution. You're going to be able to do it within your current budget, and it sounds like the savings just in overtime alone have got to be significant if we can get our head around this and get it fixed. So thanks for coming out. I assume, Madam Chairman, we don't need a motion to do this because you're taking it out of existing budgets. Through you to Rob, is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. Well, thanks again for your efforts.
Thank you. No further questions. May I please have a motion to receive the presentation? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor, carried. May I have a motion to receive item 7.2? Is that not the same? Yes. Moving on to 8.1. No, it isn't.
Excuse me, it's to receive the report to go along with the presentation.
I see. May I please have a motion to receive item 7.2? Moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All those in favor, carried. I'm learning from you how to whip through these. Is there any discussion respecting 8.1? Moved by Councillor Collins. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ferguson.
Just a question, and it may be something I should bring up under new business, and if I should, Madam Chairman, just tell me. On the development charges issue, I know we've exempted development charges trying to get the downtown going. And I know it's on a reduction of 5% per year to get this back and fully in place, but the place is booming, and we're losing a lot of development charges that other developers developing in other parts of the city are still paying and paying significantly. Should we be accelerating that? I saw the story in the paper about the television towers, and it's almost a daily event now where we see, which is very exciting, seeing all this new interest in development in downtown, but they're still exempt from, for the most part. I'm not sure what we're down to. Is it 80% now exemption to development charges if you're coming in downtown? Because again, I think the fourth year, the 5% per year phase out. Should we be moving a little quicker on that through you to Mike?
So through the chair, where we sit with respect to the CEPA development charge exemptions come, I believe it's July 5th or 6th, we moved to 75%. And our current bylaw takes us to 2018, our development charge bylaw. And that will then bring us to 70%. In 2018, we need to prepare for renewal of our development charge bylaw. So that will be before council for 2019. We need to renew the bylaw and update the bylaw with a background study, accompanying background study, before July of 2019. So in 2018, staff will have to have a conversation with council with respect to all of our development charge exemptions, not just the CEPA development charge exemption, the downtown development charge exemption that Councillor Ferguson is speaking to, but we have development charge exemptions for affordable housing, for hospitals, for education facilities. We have a variety of development charge exemptions, and so at that time, staff will be taking council through a conversation regarding those exemptions and whether there's a rationale to either amend those exemptions or to continue to provide that same level of exemption. And so often these are discretionary exemptions, and then over and above council discretionary exemptions are legislated exemptions. So at that time, we want to identify to council what the foregone benefit is to the community with regard to exempting those charges, at the same time as what we're realizing as it relates to those exemptions. One of the effects of that level of exemption, or our historical level of exemption, is it's creating a need to stage some of our development projects, meaning as we aren't collecting the revenue stream in, some of those growth-related projects are having to be deferred because of the state of our development charge reserves. So as we aren't collecting money in to put towards our development charge reserves to pay for those future projects, consequently, planning and economic development staff are having to develop staging of development programs, whereby we aren't able to proceed with all growth-related projects. We are having to prioritize some of those growth-related projects. So I apologize for the lengthy response, but it is a timely issue that we'll need to have conversations with council over the next 12 months leading up to 2019.
Okay, so you're saying, through you, Madam Chairman, to Mike, there's nothing we can do about the downtown. My fear is that we're in a housing boom. Hamilton's been discovered. The prices of land in the lower city have gone up 20 times in recent, some examples where, it's been discovered. And I don't want to wake up 2 years from now and we miss this great opportunity to help our revenue side, particularly on growth-related things. Because you start building 25, 30-foot or floor condominiums, that's a lot more toilets that are going to be flushed into the system. It has to be processed down at our plant. And are we missing this opportunity by waiting until 2019?
So through the chair, there is a process we have to follow. We are required to update our development charge background study before we make a change to the bylaw, and the staff are in the midst of preparing all the supporting documentation for that. So in order to trigger a change to the exemption requires a update to the bylaw, and that requires a whole consultation process and public engagement process. So again, we're targeting 2019 for the renewal of the bylaw, and staff are preparing all the supporting documentation that goes into the background study. This will be a very important update to the bylaw because you may recall the province has amended the regulations as it relates to waste and transit as well. So those are areas that they've provided more flexibility for municipalities to capture some of those program costs through development charges as it relates to growth projects. So again, that will form part of our conversation leading up to 2019 as well.
So Mike, my last question, I'm sorry to dominate this, Madam Chair, but Mike, so you're saying that we can't even go from 5% to 10% on the reduction until we go through this comprehensive review in 2019, so we're screwed?
Yeah, so through the chair, I won't repeat the councillor's last comment, but I will. But we do have to follow a process, and that process is the update to the bylaw, and that requires an update to our background study. So again, staff are working diligently towards preparing all of those supporting documents. You may recall that even includes the reference to intensification and the cost of intensification in our lower city, and staff are preparing that work. And again, that does require 12 months, 18 months lead time to prepare that documentation.
That's unfortunate, Madam Chairman, but I have the utmost trust in our CFO here in these kind of issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions, moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Collins. All those in favour to approve item 8.1, carried. 8.2, is there any discussion? That is the City of Hamilton Financial Report and Audited Financial Statements. Councillor Ferguson? No? Councillor Ferguson? Oh, Councillor, anybody, any questions? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All those in favour? Oh.
And I talked about trust in our financial staff, Mike and his whole team. 32 pages of notes and not one negative one. And so we don't need to read these things anymore because you never see any criticism from our auditors. This is a $2 billion a year operation, and I could not find any recommendations for improvement in what we do and the way we do our financial reporting. So just congratulations to to Mike and his entire financial team.
Star for Mike.
So through the chair, I appreciate that positive feedback, and I want to recognize Rick and Stephanie and our finance staff, our F&A staff, who go through a lot of effort as we finish our budget process. They get right into year end. So I want to thank all of the staff who work diligently towards not only the budget process, but then right after the budget process to start preparing for year end, leading into our financial statements. So thank you to all our staff.
Thank you, Councillor, for raising that. Well said. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favour? Carried. 8.3, City of Hamilton amended water and wastewater storm arrears policy. Councillor Collins.
I was hoping to get an understanding of where the changes occur. I mean, I've read the report, but traditionally these are the ones in the past that, we have somebody come in and there are issues with their billing, and we have made some changes in the past that haven't helped customers who are in unique circumstances. So I know condominiums have been referenced here, and John Savoy has been tremendously helpful to me with some condominiums who've had some issues. And I just want to make sure that what we're approving here is beneficial to both the corporation and to the residents that we're serving who may experience from time to time unique circumstances related to billing. That's for a brief summary from John. That would be great.
So through the chair, just as John prepares to highlight the changes, I just want to remind committee what triggered our review of our policies was back in December of 16. We were before you with the change by the Ontario Energy Board requiring LDCs to move to monthly billing for electricity and recognizing previously Horizon, now Electric Utilities as our billing agent. We came before you with an option to move to monthly billing for water and wastewater to align with electricity. So that caused us to review some of our policies, and so there are just some I would describe as tweaks to our policies, and I'll ask John to highlight those limited adjustments.
So through the chair, firstly on the monthly billing, that will be 100% of the city will be on monthly electric, water, and sewer billing as of June 17th. So it is now almost completed, and everything's gone well according to what I hear from Electra. So everyone should start seeing or receiving their first monthly bills now through the mail. So with that, as Mike had said, that prompted us to review a lot of our financial related policies to see if by getting your bill more frequently, does that mean that we should review some of our other aspects in terms of how we bill and collect our water and wastewater revenues? And so to that, we rely, the City of Hamilton is kind of unique in that we only rely on transfer to the tax roll to secure our revenues. We do not use service disconnection, which is quite rare actually among Ontario municipalities. Having said that, our practice has been since just prior to amalgamation at 90 days. And that was really reflecting we were billing quarterly at the time. When we shifted the billing out to Hamilton Hydro in 2002, we adopted the bi-monthly cycle for residential customers. The industrial or other large multi-residential customers were already on monthly billing at that time, but we were on a 90-day transfer. Why that wasn't reviewed to possibly move to 60 days, I'm not aware of what happened at the time. In speaking to a lot of other and surveying a lot of other Ontario municipalities, most of them are 60 days or less. City of Toronto's at 58 days. And in fact, under the region, in the early 80s, we were at 40 days, even though the billing was quarterly at that time too. So there's been a real shift in that. Now with we're moving to monthly billing, we didn't want to get in a situation where people are 3 bills behind before we get to tax roll transfer in the case of residential. It already gets confusing enough as it is. And typically, if someone's 1 and then 2 bills behind, that means they're not addressing that arrears. It was probably going to fall over to the taxes. So one of the changes we're recommending is changing to 60 days transfer. Certainly in the case of industrial and commercial customers, that was always been a concern that we were waiting as long as 90 days because there is that increased level of risk by not securing it on the property tax. So that is the one recommendation. It will take time for Electra to do the programming and that, and for us to transition. So that we're recommending it not to be till later this year for that to happen. Another benefit for customers will be, for those that do leave it to their property taxes, they are paying a higher rate of interest under Electra up to that 90-day period. So once it transfers over to the city, we actually charge a lower rate. It's 15% annual versus 19.56% through Electra. So that's the one change. Well, since we were reviewing our arrears policy, I looked at a few other communities, particularly the City of Ottawa and City of Toronto. The Auditor General in the City of Toronto did a quite extensive audit and report on their billing practices, and they brought up some circumstances that we do see from time to time. Specific, one of them is around condominiums. If a condominium that is bulk metered, where the entire complex is metered and billed for their water and wastewater services, if they basically withhold payment, what are our options? And so we've stick-handled around that when it's happened in the past, but the City of Toronto actually has a very specific process. So we thought it would be a good idea to include that right in our arrears policy. So should it happen, we now have a guideline for staff to follow. So rather than every time this happens, it's a meeting between Electra, taxation, and financial policy, and we're trying to figure out how to handle it. So we have that in place for if that occurs. Another situation is before the condominium's actually registered. You could have cases there of non-payment, and there's another provision now placed in here. And the last special circumstance is a tax-exempt property. So these would be accounts like government, hospital, or non-for-profit properties. They may be exempt from property taxes, so tax roll transfer is not exactly maybe the most significant or impactful measure. So there we're actually suggesting that if this were to happen, that we would look at service disconnection in that case. And these last special circumstances are definitely driven by work that was done in the cities of Ottawa and Toronto, and we thought it would make sense to include them at this point. So that's basically the changes.
Thanks for the very thorough summary, and I'll move it at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor, carried. Moving on to 8.4, Grants Subcommittee Report from the June. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor, carried. On to 8.5. Whoa. Okay. We're going to Councillor Vanderbeek, followed by Councillor Pearson and myself. Sorry, I keep saying Pearson, Johnson, and myself. I apologize. Councillor Vanderbeek.
Okay, thank you. Just a note that the minutes indicate that I was on city business on May the 30th. I wasn't, it was personal. So if you could just change that so it's correct, then I'm prepared to move them or second them.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I'm prepared to approve the whole except for number 4. I really appreciate the sentiment behind this issue and this idea, but I can't support, and I hope my husband's not listening to this, somebody else giving me a ring. But just on that, I remember when I worked at Family Services, a portion, we would pay 50 cents a pay, and at the end of the time when we go to retire, that 50 cents grew into a little account, and that's where my retirement present came from. So is there a way to look at this so that in fact we do pay for our own rings, but it's done off our paychecks, whether it be 50 cents, it be $1, whatever it may be, and at the end, if that's what the person chooses to do so, then they can buy their ring through that account. But right now, I cannot support buying or having a ring given to me because I've done my job. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderbeek, take the chair, please. Thank you very much. And I also echo those sentiments. I won't be supporting. I want to be listed as opposed to item 4. Thank you. Seeing that, I'm sorry, moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Collins. All those in favor, carried. We've done 9.1, notices of motion. Seeing none. Is there any items of general information or other business? Seeing none, may I please have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor, carried.